Thank you. Thanks for coming to my session. Firstly, you have to walk furthest to get here. You have to walk past Jenny and Alex and John, who were I know I would love to see that session, so I really appreciate you coming here this morning. My name is Peter Sherwin. This presentation is applicable to all subjects, all years, all ability levels. A bit about me. I'm a maths teacher at Geelong Grammar School down the road, which is my third school. Previous to Geelong, I taught in the UK at a school, Bedford School, a large independent boys' school. Prior to that, I was in Sydney teaching at another private independent boys' school, Trinity Grammar School. So at each of those schools, I've taught maths. It's been my primary role, and I've also had responsibility in other areas, boarding, day house, mastering, and also running cricket programs, coaching first 11 teams, that sort of thing, which is part and parcel of independent education. The reason I'm giving you some of that background is just to give this talk some context. I do draw on some of my experiences to talk about my learnings to do with this, what's become a sort of a life-long passion of mine, and that is to hunt down this concept of culture and control and tap into it and use it to the advantage of my students and my classrooms. And it's sort of an accidental journey in a way, but now it's become quite intentional, which is what this talk is about. And having dropped my boarding commitments and my high-level cricket commitments, I'm really now focused on the classroom. And that's giving me a great sort of second life as a teacher as I go into my sort of 31st year, I think, in the profession. So what you will hear in this presentation is a result of 30 years of teaching. I'm not a researcher. I'm a regular classroom teacher, as I suspect a lot of you are. I'm on a full teaching load, and in the process of wanting to teach well, I've been zeroing in on exactly what it is that makes excellent teaching practice. It's a presentation that gives a mix of anecdotes and evidence, and hopefully in something approaching the right balance. This talk is about culture, what it is, why it matters, and how to manoeuvre it to our advantage. It is about my own experiences and observations in my life's work of studying culture. It is about what I've learnt from the best performing UK schools in the toughest areas. But it is also about the purpose behind shaping culture, because all cultural conquests have a purpose, and that is to pave the way to high performance in whatever field is appropriate. Our cultural conquest is to pave the way to high student wellbeing and optimal academic achievement. So how do we optimise academic achievement once the culture is set right? Simply, we teach explicitly and we employ desirable difficulties. And that final bullet point there, this is the outline of the talk really. I'm going to draw on some of my experiences, personal experiences, my observations of a couple of months ago. I was in the UK and I went on a bit of a tour of schools. I'll talk about that. I'll also then talk about, once we've set the culture for high performance, how do we then maximise that opportunity we give ourselves once we've got the culture right. So maybe 90% of this talk is about getting the culture right, but then I'm going to touch on a couple of things which I think, the last two bullet points, explicit teaching, which is clearly the best way for us to teach our students, but also the last point there, desirable difficulties. I've given a couple of ResearchED talks just on desirable difficulties, so it's going to be difficult for me to finish this session off quickly because I'll want to go into it. I've given a podcast and a webinar on that, just that last bullet point. But I'm going to try and incorporate it because I just feel like it's a really important idea that we embrace the desirable difficulties of that enhance our students' learning, but also the desirable difficulties that we can employ as teachers in our questioning techniques, etc., that make it a more fertile learning environment for our students. So, So what is culture? Simply put, culture is behaviour. We can see culture in the behaviour of a community. So how is our community's behaviour? When I talk about our community, I'm talking about our Australia-wide classroom community of schools. Here we have, in December 2023, the Teacher Education Expert Panel handed down a report on the state of Australian school classrooms and made 14 recommendations. Why was this panel recruited? In large part because our classrooms are among the most poorly behaved in the world. As it's highlighted on the screen, 69th out of 76 on those PISA measurements that were used. So up on the screen now we have a chart from CEASE, the Centre for Education, Statistics and Evaluation, that's illustrating how frequently teachers wait a long time for students to quieten down at the start of lessons, so we can get on with it. New South Wales is in pink, Australia numbers are in striped. Teachers, you can see up on the screen, report that in about 70% of their lessons, they're forced to wait a long time for their classes to settle to an acceptable level before they can get on with the lesson. Unsurprisingly, this is forcing teachers out of our profession. So a quick tour of my cultural journey, as I promised a moment ago. As soon as I started my teaching journey, I was introduced to the world of coaching. And quite quickly had the school first 11 cricket jobs thrust upon me. This was back in my first job in Sydney. I was lucky enough to inherit a strong side that in that first year, and then I took them on to an undefeated premiership. Anyone could have coached that side to a premiership. They were considerably stronger than any other team in the competition that year. But we still meet up for annual reunions. That's me and the team. And we'll meet up next month in Sydney for our 26th reunion, having only missed the COVID years since they left school. So the question is, why do we still meet? Bedford School in the UK, where I was given an opportunity to run their cricket project, which I took with both hands. This is a 450-year-old school with a strong cricketing pedigree, counting among other illustrious alumni, the ex-England captain Alistair Cook. Now, the culture of this club in its first 11 was strong, but noticeably, almost proudly, unhealthy. Elitism and laziness were evident, as were demeaning traditions and uneven recognition of dispense with some unhealthy traditions. This was not always popular, but it was necessary. But I also restored some traditions, some healthy ones. Among them were the reinstatement It took a couple of seasons, but we built a culture of excellence in the cricket program at Bedford School. Yes, we had some good players, but so did other schools. What gave us the edge, and I wouldn't have been able to articulate it at the time, was the superpower of a high performance culture. Around the same time, I took on a boarding house, which was also suffering from neglect. I felt that we could have the same impact in the house as the cricket club, despite it having a less obvious performance focus. But I was learning that building culture wasn't about performance. It was about consistency, about care, and about always showing up. But other than a determination to run high-functioning, happy, and successful environments, there was no recipe for what I was doing. And in the classroom, where there was not a team identity to appeal to, there was less success. Whilst my students were doing okay, it was on the strength of a tightly managed, harmonious classroom rather than any pedagogical prowess on my part. And so upon moving back to Australia from the UK and discovering, quite by accident, the wonderful community of educators on Twitter, my focus shifted to the classroom. I soon discovered that the classroom environment would require a more intentional approach to culture building. My research helped me understand why I had been able to run successful sporting and boarding programs. But importantly now, what I needed to do to be successful in my classroom teaching. So I've become a student of culture because I know if I can get this right, I will give my students the best possible environment in which to learn. And I will give myself the best possible environment in which to teach. All I do need to do is give clear explanations, ask good questions, check for understanding, correct, adapt, refine, provide opportunities for practice, up until it is there, and then repeat the process. But the good news is that once the culture is set, the ship is steady, and teaching and learning can take centre stage. One thing I've learned in the last few years, in the words of tennis player and women activist Utilising, if you want to be it, you have to see it. To create the best learning environments, you have to see the best up close. To be the best teacher possible, you have to see the best. And it was the pursuit of this inspiration that took me to Michaela Community School in North London for the first time 5 years ago. A visit that changed my view on what was possible in the classroom. A visit that changed me as a teacher, a visit that had the most profound effect on my teaching practice. I've spent the last 5 years since that visit, fueled by this injection of inspiration, refining my practice, listening to experts, similarly driven in the pursuit of excellent teaching, and noticing remarkable improvements in the attainment of my own students. In January of this year, I had the opportunity to go back to the UK to visit 4 of the very best schools in the country. Of course, I had to go back to Michaela, but I also visited Mercia School in Sheffield, a new school built on the site of a failing school in a heavily disadvantaged area on the outskirts of Sheffield, where they do a termly reboot of classroom routines. And the first day of each term, I was there on the day they were doing this term reboot, this termly reboot at the start of the first day in school at the start of January. I was also there on this day where, and I was able to take part in what they call a deliberate practice mastery session, a DP mastery session, which is a weekly session that the teachers partake in whilst the students are in assembly. And they're run by senior members of staff, and they are so the session I attended involved teachers practicing entry and exit routines. So I sat there and was asked to leave the room with everyone else and quite extraordinary place, run by the charismatic and ever so controversial Catherine Bertelsing, a friend of ResearchED. A school that has to be seen to be believed, quite frankly. You can visit any one of these classrooms and you can see where the school is. It's right by the railway there in the core part of North London near Wembley Stadium. You can go to any one of these classrooms at any time on any day and you will be witness to the very best lesson you've ever seen. I thought I was doing okay in my teaching until I went here. And it's absolutely inspirational, but also quite grounding to see this school in operation and the teachers doing what they're doing. The Totteridge Academy in North London was next, where they have 3 100-minute lessons a day. Without breaks in those lessons. And where you can drop into a lesson, as I did in the 98th minute, and see energy levels as high as you saw in the second minute, from all levels of ability and attainment. I saw their inspirational principal, Chris Fairbairn, who's pictured there, who took this school on 10 years ago, another failing school that he took on, and it is now one of the best in the country. With a long waiting list. He addressed his staff at 8:30 with warmth and humour. He then took a year group assembly of Year 11s who were approaching exams, and he had some exam tips for them. And then he headed off to a Year 7 maths class, a 100-minute Year 7 maths class, which he took. It was the lowest attaining Year 7 group, and that's their language, by the way. They talk about this as low attaining and high attaining classes, rather than things or ability or anything like that. So Chris took a maths class for 100 minutes. This is the principal. Talk about leading from the front. So he was an inspiration. That school was an inspiration. And my last school visit was to the impressive Arczone Academy in northwest London, where the students stay in the same class all day. It's an incredible place. There is no movement. Apart the teachers look, and the students stay put. They stay in the same. It's quite a simple idea, I guess, but a lot of schools battle with this, the movement between classes. And in fact, those other schools that I went to have very strict corridor rules, and they famously have silent corridors and sort of stuff. And but these guys don't need to, because there's no movement through the corridors. The students are in that classroom, and the teachers move. Which was incredibly efficient and quiet. So the teachers leave, and what I also noticed there that the students each morning attend a tutor period with their tutor, and they whiteboard marker out or a ruler or something to some student somewhere, because it just breaks momentum. That's a problem. So these schools have attended to the so much, perhaps because they are from advantaged backgrounds. All these schools, these students are from disadvantaged backgrounds, and they've got some ground to make up. So they cannot, their imperative is that they must make every minute count. And there's a certain, there's a real purpose to all of the lessons and everything that goes on has a little purpose, and it's quite inspirational. So whilst they have that imperative, and that's what drives and motivates them, my thinking is every student should be, regardless of background, should be entitled to a classroom like these that, from minute 1 to minute 50 or minute 100, are purposeful environments where great reading is taking place. That's what I took from this. So I spent the best part of a day at each of these schools. in a variety of lessons, and I did not see a single student lose focus. 4 schools, 4 days. I didn't see a student lose focus, and I'm not just saying that. So I was walking into classes. You know how much of a disruption that is to a class, but it was like I wasn't there. I was embarrassed. No student looked at me. No teacher broke stride in their lesson. It was just, we find the visitor. But the point was they were so focused on what the teacher was saying in the lesson, on they were so engaged in the topic. I didn't see a single teacher take the foot off the pedal. I saw teachers free to teach, and I saw students free to learn inside safe, happy classrooms. I saw the best at their best. This is the teaching. What I imagine it must be like to go and watch the All Blacks trade to the upcoming match, or one of the Australian men's Olympic finals, or just the best at their best. Everyone knows their job, and it was so impressive. It was jaw-droppingly good. And whilst they all brought their own flavour, there were some commonalities. The behaviour was immaculate. From the polite greetings exchanged between students and senior staff at the school gate in the morning, to the pleasant and polite corridor exchanges, to the farewells at the end of the day, you count them up, there were hundreds of warm, polite exchanges every day. The students were all being noticed, and they were held to account. They were not reciprocating the super polite teachers and staff that they were interacting with every day. There was absolute respect for the adult authority, and I did not see one example of student misbehaviour, not even trace. Classroom questioning was relentless and fully supported. Students gave full sentence answers at strong volume and were encouraged to do so. And if they weren't quite there, they were asked to repeat. They were directed towards success, and they were clearly confident as a result of this success culture. Teachers were dropping into each other's lessons constantly, staying for 3 to 5 minutes, making a few notes, and moving on. At ResearchED, each teacher gets roughly 40 drop-ins a term. That's 40 pieces of positive feedback and refinement tips for each teacher every term. In 10 years, I've had one. I don't know about you. This is, and some people might. This was I don't know if any of you follow Pritesh Rachira on Twitter. He's a teacher at ResearchED, and he tweeted this, and there was a huge backlash from a lot of teachers reeling at the idea of being intruded upon so often. And I think we do feel a bit protective of our environment sometimes, don't we? But in this, if you visit the school, you can see the flow and you can see the support. Well, this is a collegiate body just looking after each other. So I found it thoroughly inspiring. So all students were in, so there were no passengers. All students were in every lesson. There was no one sort of tucked back at the back of the room looking out the window. They were all participating and they were all thinking hard. So there were some pedagogical commonalities. So they were the cultural commonalities, pedagogical commonalities. The routines and language were taught and reinforced. At Mercia, they had a quarterly reboot, which took up half the day, which I referred to before. It took up half the day. They considered it a great investment of time. The clarity of instruction was remarkable. Students always asked to repeat instructions. So there was the students knew exactly what they needed to be doing every minute of the lesson. The pace was impressive. Not rushed, but a purposeful pace. I don't know, this was probably the most stark thing for me, is the pace. And I look at my lessons and I'm going so slowly. So when I came back from, even now, even though I'm trying to be more purposeful and more, it's hard. And I think it's because every single classroom these students walk into has the same routine. So they just walk in and the language is the same, the presentation is the same, they know what to expect. So it is harder if you don't have that whole school objective, but it's still something that I feel like I can't go fast enough. And like I said, it's not rushing the kids, you're just keeping them busy. And I still have kids in my class that they're just not being busy enough, even though I'm really trying to pick up the pace. Right, so not a moment was wasted. Classroom time is precious, and like I referred to earlier, the imperative on making every minute count was really wonderful. And it's clear that all members of the school community believe this to their core. That this was the most important thing. We've got to make every minute count. All activities started with a go or on three. There was a countdown or there was a start. It wasn't. It was very clear that students knew they all got. It was like starting a 100-metre race with everyone going at the same time, and then there was a very clear finish to every activity. So that really helped the pacing. I think if I think of my own teaching, it's just that they're a bit more blurred than I'd like them to be. It really helped the pacing of these classes. Every lesson was supported by booklets also, which allowed for great flow and equality across classes. And the class, they all learnt together. There was no activity A, B. It was, we're all in this together. And there was, at each school, it was clear that there was some rough streaming going on, the ability streaming, which was sensible. It wasn't obvious what class you were in at all. And I don't think it was a big deal at all to the students of the school. But it was there, and it just made it easier for them all to move together. But they worked all together through booklets, and there's a great sense of team about it. In fact, that word team is what all the teachers did, World War School. Okay, team. It was the real sense like that oneness idea that we're all moving together. I like that, especially coming from our sport and talking about that. So we need to, moving on, we need to design this feature to cultural architect. Cultural norms are both inescapable and powerful, and if we don't steer them, the students certainly will. I've read, and I tune a lot into Peps McFarlane and so we make this up. So in Peps's words, we either choose the social norms or they choose us. And our job, also another Pepsism, we must nudge norms. We must nudge them in the direction of excellent behaviour, familiar routines, high expectations, high success, and generally high standards of kindness, courtesy, and hard work. Now, these were the hallmarks of all these successful schools that I've visited. In a lot of those excellent behaviour, there was so much familiarity with the routines. High success and high expectations. It was very clear that the teachers were not standing for laziness or anything short of what students could do. So even in the answers that they were providing, full answers given really in classroom language, not in street language. They were really asked to raise themselves, and then the response was inspiring, and students really came to the party. I love this crowd. I really like this crowd. Quote on the power of culture. Like Phil Kempsey's book there as well. Another book that is influential in the lot of culture driving in schools is this one from Dan Pink. It takes an evolutionary view of motivation in his book Drive, which incidentally is the motivation or it's the inspiration for the whole school approach at Dixon's School, which is another, not one that I went to, but another high-performing, famously cognitive, strong and healthy cultural school. Bennett King outlines the three drivers to human motivation: a biological driver, which serves our primal needs and urges; the extrinsic driver, the carrot and stick, the cash is king kind of motive; and the third, more relevant to us and more nuanced and subtle, yet more powerful driver, that is activated by a desire to be good at things, natural curiosity, being interested in ideas, a desire to make a contribution to the world, a desire to serve a greater purpose and be part of the team. This is the one that we're interested in as schools. For high performance, what matters most is that third driver. Fink argues that appealing to the third driver is the basis for establishing a culture of excellence. So, what have I learnt about culture and where am I now? Culture, in essence, refers to how things are done around here. It is all-powerful. Harnessing it is our teaching superpower. And attending to culture is upstream thinking. It cuts off problems at the past. We must focus our energies on designing a culture that will support high levels of student well-being and academic success. And so what does success in the classroom look like? I love this quote. If you're willing. So three my subject maths. Getting clear about it. That's if I can get that, I feel like I'm doing half the job. Students motivated to learn and fueled by past success and appropriate challenge. The 80% rule. So if success leads to motivation, it's something that I certainly buy into now, where the first half of my career was the other way around. And Rosenshine made famous this 80% rule. That's our idea. That's the level of success that we want to be aiming for in our classroom. That means it's in the questions we're asking our students just during every day, just during our lessons. We want them to have 80% high success, but not easy success. Students possessing a very clear understanding of classroom expectations and standards, and students possessing a very clear idea of and reassured by intelligible, consistent, predictable routines. On this last point, running routines makes the process of learning easy, so the focus can be purely on the challenge of content. Simple routines take up to 20 runs or 3 to 4 weeks to become automated. Benefits for students include increased feelings of safety, well-being and confidence. For us teachers, they free up the behaviour burden and allow our teaching to be more responsive. So on routines, by way of example, here are mine. If possible, I'm class before my students, or I am arriving with them. It's easy to get caught up in corridor channel one class. I try and avoid this. I set my classroom up in the same way every lesson. For me, it's new whiteboards on the desks, with their pairs, facing the front, and there's a seat of my students. Same way where to sit. I don't want them walking the golden dark night on sitting today. That's an unnecessary distraction. Students arriving in my classroom should herald the following message: that they belong, that I am pleased to see them, and that I am well prepared for what is to follow. I want to see a shift in their demeanour as they cross the threshold into my room. A shift that reflects their respect for what goes on in my room. Conversations don't continue. Jokes do not get told. Pranks or put-downs won't make place. I want them to know they are entering a productive and proud learning space, and they'd better not mess with that. Students will be on the lookout for the starter activity, a do now, or a retrieval quiz. There always is one, and they know where to find it. They also know that this is a paced activity and that they need to get on with it. Rating the positive of our students get to work nudges the norms in the direction we want them to go. This is what we'll call a strong start. Then follows an I do, we do, you do process. It's first teaching, with an emphasis on clear modelling. Followed by checking thoroughly for understanding, by cold calling with whiteboard, etc. And finally to independent practice in knowledge science. A common language around routines is important for me. and it was clear in these schools that there was a language they understood. Now, I'll spend a couple of weeks, certainly first few lessons, on pretty strong reinforcement, teaching my school, teaching my classroom language, which doesn't exist in other parts of the school. So a common language around routines is important, particularly the go-to strategies. So for me, and I'm going to run through these. Some of them will make no sense to you at all, but I feel like I should share them with you. So threshold, crossing the threshold is important. Everyone counts. These are things I will mention, and the students know what they mean. The do now is the starter. The voices are off once you're in the room. That acronym, which reminds them how to sit up and listen. I say you say, call, no opt-out. Cover your whiteboards. Together on 3. 1, 2, 3. Right, let's go. Heads down. What does heads down mean? So these things have to be explained to them. And like Mercia School, the investment pays off big time. I talked to them about the forgetting curve as well, so they know how important people practices and dog size when we're working on our own. These all help students understand the means of participation I am seeking. Routines are the glue to a well-planned and paced lesson, which also is the best antidote to classroom disruption. I don't get an early pickup, ever. Now, from SEATS, the evidence suggests it is important to establish and teach classroom rules and routines to communicate classroom expectations and provide structure, which is written up on the screen now. Now, these techniques, so keeping them going. Once you've established a culture, it's keeping them going. Now, these techniques, which are out of the Mott's Tuba, or this is verbal manual, are great for keeping watch over an established culture and nailing boundaries. So warm, strict combines personal warmth with high expectations and a no-nonsense firmness. Being warm, friendly, and concerned, but at the same time uncompromising and consistently by the book. Least invasive intervention involves expressing your disapproval or bringing our students' focus back into the room without losing time on the learning trails, without being fussy or dictatorial. Bright lines is a top movement of things. I think we talked about it before, clear starts and ends, starting with a bang and finishing cleanly. And unlike Pastoral's Perch, named after the first teacher, Lamov, saw using the technique consistently, you see the picture of it down there in the corner, the position in the room that enables you to have the best view of your troops. Go to the perch after setting some independent work and wait a full 3 minutes before responding to questions. This really settles the room nicely. And there's the Pastoral's Perch position, which makes such a difference. If you've used it, you'll know what I'm talking about. So now's the time to teach. We've set the room up for success. Now how are we going to teach? So I talked about obviously explicit teaching, and I'm going to touch on a few desirable difficulties because this is the 7 minutes left, and so that gives me 7 minutes of what I'd like to spend now talking about. So with awareness of the learning hierarchy of acquisition, fluency, and generalisation, we're going to teach explicitly to allow our students to acquire the knowledge, acquire fluency. Obviously, that's really important. I've got in there the I do, we do, you do, and then generalisation. So that's the learning hierarchy that I would get to. And this is going to be done via explicit teaching and achieving a high success rate through clear explanations and feverish checks for understanding. Because we now know that the success motivation causal arrow has its origins in success, not in motivation, as I believe for the first half of my teaching career. And strong student relationships have their origin in our dedicated and devoted teaching practices, not inside of previous things. So explicit teaching, what is it? It's clear explanations, clear modelling of new information and new procedures in small bite-sized chunks. in a nod to cognitive load theory, the single most important thing for teachers to know, according to Dylan William. You'd be brave to argue against that. Asking plenty of questions to check for understanding at each stage and allowing for high levels of success. It's the old critical model. Fading the scaffolding as the teacher, as the learner becomes more adept. And all the while, we must maintain a high ratio of participation and thought. Talked about those classrooms having their goal, and it's a lofty goal, but let's shoot for a top right. Horizontal axis, participation ratio. So we want all our students participating all the whole lesson, but we also want them thinking. So high participation, low thought, no, not great. Low participation, high thought, not great. We want top right. But we often are dealing with the ratios default to slide down to the bottom left. This is what we refer to as the default position, because if we don't really, if we're not mindful, this is where we head. We will take the same hands that go up, because that's easy. It gives great flow to the lesson if I just do that. But obviously we're going to suffer on the ratio front. So we're fighting gravity. We want to coax the yellow dot to the top right-hand corner of this graph. And here is where we want our students, 100% of the time. Everybody's answering every question and thinking deeply about it. Even those who don't speak. How is this going to be done? It is about one. Good question. With a clear, consistent and continual means of participation model, such as the one on our screen. I owe a little debt of gratitude to Pritesh Rachura for this kind of flowchart of questioning. I say, you say. So a little example, the longest side of a right-angled triangle, we call that the hypotenuse. I say, you say, hypotenuse. Good. So that's right at the top, because I want you to learn this new term. And then a little later, I might ask a question. I might say, so what do we call? What is the name for the longest side of a right-angled triangle? So now I've asked the question, and I might take one of these 5 approaches, just depending on what I want to do. If I'm really confident that you know the answer to my question, I'll say, together on 3, 1, 2, 3, there you go. Or I might want you to draw it on your new whiteboard. So I'll say, draw the right angle triangle on your new whiteboard and draw an arrow to your hypotenuse on your new whiteboard, go. I'll teach it to task on that. Or I might just cold call. Or I might say, tell your partner. But when I do that, what is the name given to the longest side of a right angle triangle? I'm always going to give a couple of seconds for everyone to think, to push that yellow dot towards the top right. Everyone's thinking, and then I'll decide what to do. Tell your partners. Go. So you tell your partner, and then that's going to take 30 seconds. And I'll count you back in. 3, 2, 1. And then I'll take hands and then a cold call. But if I'm confident you all know the answer, I'll call and respond. Or I might say, heads down. Now the head's down. I love the heads down. Heads down, fists up. And if I can see, so all heads down, I can see everyone's fists. And I'll say open for, so what do we call a right triangle? Open for adjacent. So some students will open, maybe. I'll say close. Open for Rupert. Obviously that's a silly idea, but some joker in the room might open their hand for that. Open for, what do we call it? Open for hypotenuse. So I get a very quick visual on, is there an understanding about what the name of this long side of the right triangles. So this is a great suite of strategies that enable us to push that yellow dot towards the far left corner. And it takes a little while to get used to, but it's so powerful. The students are thinking the whole time. I'm not going to refer to. I'm going to talk about this. But this is a group of schools that are committed to an explicit teaching model, and the results are amazing. This, I've now left it to all the full-time sirens to bring up desirable difficulties, which is crazy. But this graphic looks quickly at how we typically think of learning. We teach, we revise, we test, but actually how learning happens is that we need to teach. We need to allow for a bit of forgetting, and then we need to retrieve it. We need to ask our students to retrieve information and then allow them to forget again. And each retrieval strengthens their memory of that information. I love this study because it's like a study on desirable difficulties that encapsulates all the great benefits of desirable difficulties. I don't have time to talk through it, but it was a study done where, well, I'm going quickly. There's, sorry. So you can see the concepts on the left-hand side. Weekly instruction took place. Concepts A through F. A, B, and C concepts were quizzed. D and F weren't. So what we've got at the end of each week, we got a quiz. Each student got a quiz, and they got a quiz that was either in blocked format or in interleaved format. So the blocked quiz would have 3 questions on a certain thing. So if we look back to trigonometry, it would be on maybe finding the hypotenuse, the left side of the line of triangle, then it'd be 3 questions on finding the shorter side, etc. The interleaved quiz mixed them all up, and we're exploring the power of interleaving. And then there was a delay after a month, after these 4 weekly tests. They all took a test after a month's break, and these were the results. And what that says, in essence, is that the students in that weekly test did better on the blocks. But in the end of, after a month's break, if they had interleaved those false cookies, where you can see that they outperformed those students that had been taking the block quizzes, and the control were those things that weren't tested at all. So we can see through that, the control being lower shows us that spacing is good. That's one of our desirable difficulties. The interleave, beating the blocking, shows that interleaving rather than blocking is desirable. So that's a beautiful study that summarises our desirable difficulties. This is my last slide. I love this because this is what my work is really, and it's what it's got me. Right at the start, I said, I'm going to touch on some experience, personal experience, but also some evidence. And I think hopefully I've hit something like the right balance for you. Thank you for coming to this session. Thanks for your attention.